Welcome to Serious Spoilers. Today I will share a movie based on true story from 2014, titled, The Theory of Everything. Spoilers ahead. Watch and enjoy. Cambridge, England, 1963, a young Stephen Hawking is riding his bike with his friend Brian. They arrive at a party on their campus. This is where Stephen first sees and meets the lovely Jane Wilde. She is majoring in French and Spanish arts while he is studying theoretical physics. He is also part of the school's rowing team. Jane is a regular churchgoer, while Stephen does not agree with the idea of an omnipotent God that controls the universe. Stephen is having trouble trying to figure out a subject for his doctorate. His professor Dennis Sciamma takes him into a room where he claims several great minds before them came to make their own discoveries in science. At the same time, Stephen decides to pursue Jane. He invites her over to meet his family for lunch, and they later go to a ball where they share their first dance and kiss. Sciamma takes his students into London to sit through a lecture from Roger Penrose on his theory on gravitational singularity in black holes. This inspires Stephen to propose a theory that applies to the entire universe, to trace back the creation of the universe through time. He starts writing mathematical equations and research, when his hands start trembling. As he is walking on campus, Stephen stumbles and falls, hitting the ground hard and losing consciousness. Stephen sees a doctor and, after having some tests run, is told that he has a motor neuron disease that will slowly affect the muscles in his body that affect movements. While his brain will not be affected, he is told that patients with this disease have a life expectancy of 2 years. After the diagnosis, Stephen spends much of his time in his room, depressed and angry while trying to finish his research. Brian informs Jane of what's happened, and she visits Stephen. She invites him to play croquet, but Stephen refuses. He relents when she says she will not come back if he doesn't join her. However, the game is too frustrating for him as he can hardly move properly. Stephen wishes to be left alone, but Jane says she loves him, and she will stay with him for however long they have. Stephen meets with Sciamma, Penrose, and Kip Thorne as they have reviewed Stephen's thesis. While they agree the mathematics are a bit sloppy, the overall theory is brilliant. Stephen earns his PhD. Subsequently, he and Jane are married, and over the years, they have 2 children, Robert and Lucy. The disease also continues to affect Stephen, forcing him to move in a wheelchair while his speech also starts to deteriorate. Stephen later presents to a lecture hall a new idea of his, the second law of black hole dynamics, in which some particles can escape black holes, and that they are full of heat radiation, and they will eventually disappear in an explosion. The theory receives a grand reception. Jane and the children present Stephen with an electric wheelchair as a gift. However, the amount of work she puts into taking care of Stephen starts to take a toll on Jane's nerves. Her mother Beryl suggests to her to return to church and join the choir. Jane does so and meets the choir director Jonathan Jones. He has recently lost his wife and is still mourning. Jane invites Jonathan over for dinner, listening to Stephen developing more theories. Jane and Jonathan take the children on a camping trip. While Stephen is at a show, he starts choking and falls ill. He goes into a coma and Jane returns home immediately upon hearing the news. The doctor tells her that they will perform a tracheotomy that would leave him unable to speak again. Jane gives birth to a 3rd child, Timothy. Stephen's sister accuses her of conceiving the child with Jonathan. Jonathan even reveals that he has feelings for Jane, which Jane admits to reciprocating. A live-in nurse, Elaine Mason, is hired to look after Stephen. She helps him communicate through facial movements and small gestures. Stephen eventually gets a speech-generating device to communicate. He charms Elaine with his sense of humor, and she tells Jane he is a good patient. Stephen begins working on his first book, A Brief History of Time. He later tells Jane that he's invited Elaine to go with him to America following the book's release. Jane is upset. She knows she's tried her best to care for Stephen, but both of them come to realize that Jane no longer has a place there with him. They know that this is the end of their marriage. Jane eventually moves out. She returns to church and pursues a relationship with Jonathan. Stephen goes to a presentation for everyone that has read A Brief History of Time. He has become known around the world for his research and theories. Shyama introduces him on stage to thunderous applause. People ask him several questions, and he makes jokes such as telling someone that he is not the real Stephen Hawking because the real one is much better looking. At one point, he sees a girl drop her pen. He envisions himself being able to walk and pick it up for her. One man asks Stephen about his disbelief in God and what his life philosophy is. Stephen replies that there are no boundaries to the universe or human endeavor, and that no matter how bad things may get, there is always hope. The audience applauds him. The last scene has Stephen and Jane take their kids to meet the Queen. Jane says to Stephen that he can turn down the knighthood if he chooses. They watch their children running around in the garden. Stephen tells Jane, "Look at what we made." The ending text says that A Brief History of Time has sold more than 10 million copies around the world. At 72, Stephen Hawking has no plans to retire and is still looking into a theory of everything. Jane Hawking earned her PhD in Spanish poetry and is happily married to Jonathan Jones. She and Stephen remain close friends and have 3 grandchildren. What did you think of the movie? I want to hear your comments below. Thanks everyone for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Until the next spoiler.